I was 29 when this happened, working as a junior logistics coordinator for a mid-sized tech supplier outside Washington, D.C. It was early November 2025, right in the middle of the federal government shutdown that had already dragged on for weeks. Every day felt tense in the city. Federal buildings were half-staffed, metro stations were packed at weird hours, and small businesses were quietly panicking because contracts weren't being processed. My job wasn't directly federal, but most of our clients were. So I was stuck in this limbo where I still had to show up to the office, even though almost nobody on the other end was working. I'm not dramatic by nature, and I don't scare easily. I bike to work, keep to myself, follow routines, and usually chalk strange things up to coincidence. But this night has changed the way I see the world. It started on a Thursday. The office had dismissed us early because a security checkpoint at a nearby federal complex had been shut down abruptly due to staffing issues, and traffic outside was completely gridlocked. My boss told us to use the time wisely and get ahead on reports from home. Honestly, I was relieved. The atmosphere had felt heavier every day. People arguing on the street, commuters getting into shouting matches, random outages, missed paychecks, protests forming in the evenings. I decided to stop by a small convenience store on my way home, something I'd done countless times. The sun was setting early, winter creeping in, and that's where the normal part of my day ended. The convenience store was one of those narrow, overlit corner places crammed between a liquor shop and a shuttered dry cleaner. I'd been stopping there at least twice a week for years. The owner, Mr. Patel, usually stood behind the counter reading a newspaper or watching cricket on his phone. But that day, he wasn't there. Instead, his teenage nephew, Arav, I think, sat on a stool, scrolling his phone with a nervous kind of focus. "Evening," I said as I walked in. He looked up, startled. "Oh, hey, sorry, long day." I didn't think much of it. Everyone seemed on edge lately. With the shutdown, people weren't getting paid, shifts were being doubled, and rumors were spreading faster than facts. Inside the store, a couple of shelves were half empty. Normal stuff like batteries and canned soup. I figured supply trucks were delayed again. I grabbed a protein bar, a bottle of water, and a pack of gum. When I approached the counter, Arav kept glancing toward the front windows like he was expecting someone. "You guys closing early today?" I asked. "Maybe," he said. "My uncle said to lock up if anything happens near the metro entrance. People were yelling earlier. I didn't understand what it was about." Again, not unusual. The shutdown had created this weird collective irritability. Everyone's patience was gone. I paid, nodded thanks, and stepped outside. The sky had turned a dull purple, and the streetlights buzzed faintly. A few federal workers in ID lanyards walked by, talking in frustrated tones. A homeless man near the metro escalator was holding a cardboard sign written in red marker: "No pay, no food, no chance." I unlocked my bike, put my bag in the basket, and started pedaling toward the trail that cut behind the federal buildings. Nothing felt wrong yet, but looking back, I think the first thread had already been pulled. The trail behind the federal complex was usually my favorite part of the commute. It cut through a narrow stretch of trees, lit sporadically by tall lamps that flickered more than they should. It wasn't isolated exactly, just quiet enough to feel like a break from the city noise. But that night, the quiet felt different, heavy, like the air itself was listening. As I pedaled, I noticed something off. One of the security gates that normally sealed off an employee-only parking area was stuck half open. A pair of orange cones lay on their sides, like they'd been knocked over. I slowed down, glancing inside. Normally, there would be at least one security guard sitting in the booth, but it was dark, completely empty. Again, shutdown, furloughed staff, reduced overnight presence. It made sense. Still, I pedaled faster. A few minutes in, I saw a man standing just off the path, near one of the lampposts. Not blocking the trail, just standing. Too still. He wasn't dressed like a federal worker or a commuter. No briefcase, no badge, no bike, just a dark jacket and jeans. His hands were in his pockets, and his head was angled slightly downward, like he was studying the asphalt. As I approached, he lifted his head. Not fully, just enough that I could tell he was staring at me. I did what I always do when I feel awkward. Gave a small nod and looked away, pretending I hadn't really noticed him. He didn't move. No reaction, no shift of weight, no acknowledgement. Just staring. It was weird, but I rationalized it instantly. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe he was unhoused and trying not to draw attention. Maybe I was being paranoid. I kept pedaling, harder than before. After another minute, I glanced back over my shoulder. He was still standing there, but his head was now tilted slightly to the side, like he was trying to hear something far away. Or maybe, like he was listening to me. I told myself I was overthinking it, but something in my stomach had started to twist. The trail curved left, blocking my view of the man entirely. For a few seconds I actually felt relieved, like distance alone was enough to settle my nerves. I focused on the rhythmic click of my bike chain, the cold air burning my lungs, the dull hum of traffic from a nearby road. Then I heard footsteps. Not behind me. Ahead. Quick, uneven footsteps on pavement. At first, I thought they were coming from someone exiting the federal building up ahead, but as I slowed down, the sound stopped too. I froze with one foot on the ground, squinting toward the next lamppost. No one. Just a scattering of dead leaves. The shutdown had left that entire area understaffed, and the lack of visible security suddenly felt wrong. Vulnerable. Exposed. I got back on the bike and pushed harder. As I approached the long footbridge that crossed over the maintenance road, I saw something that made my arms go cold, a dark jacket disappearing behind the concrete support pillar. The same man? It had to be. There was no shortcut, no other trail he could have taken to get ahead of me. I braked so abruptly the back wheels skidded. For a long 5 seconds, I just sat there straddling the bike, staring at the pillar. The wind pushed dead leaves across the path, scraping them along the ground. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it, that the jacket was someone else's, that it was a trick of the light, but I knew the shape, the way it moved, the way it didn't move enough. I backed up the bike slowly, my pulse thudding in my ears. I considered turning around entirely, but the trail behind me was a long, dim tunnel leading straight back to him. So I did the only thing that felt remotely logical. I rode forward, keeping my distance, preparing to sprint. When I passed the pillar, I forced myself to look. He wasn't there, but someone had scraped a fresh, jagged line across the concrete, as if with a key or a blade. Fresh dust lay on the ground. That's when I knew I wasn't imagining anything. I crossed the footbridge fast, gripping the handlebars so tightly my fingers throbbed. The trail on the other side opened into a dim plaza behind one of the federal annex buildings, normally lit, usually monitored by at least one guard. But that night, every window was dark. A printed sign taped crookedly to the entrance read, "Due to the shutdown, this facility is closed until further notice." I scanned the plaza, empty. For a moment, I let myself believe I'd lost him. Then I heard fabric shifting behind me. I spun around. The man stood at the far end of the bridge, right where I'd just been. He wasn't walking. He was just there, like he'd stepped into the frame of a photograph. His head was lowered again, but his body leaned forward slightly, like an animal about to move. "Hey!" My voice cracked. "Do you need something?" He didn't answer, didn't blink, didn't even pretend to acknowledge the question. He took one step onto the bridge, not fast, slow, deliberate. "No," I whispered to myself, "not happening." I pushed the bike backward, trying to buy a few more feet of distance. The man took another step, then another. His pace never changed, but there was something horribly intentional about the way he closed the space. No hesitation, no uncertainty, like he already knew the script, and I was just acting it out. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the bike. "Stop," I said, louder this time. "Seriously, stop." He did, but only for a second. Then he tilted his head again, that same slight angle I'd seen before, as if he were listening. But now, up close, it looked wrong. Too sharp, too focused, like he was tuning himself to me. "What do you want?" I shouted. That's when he finally spoke. His voice was low, rough, like someone unused to talking. "You're alone." Not a question, not a threat, a confirmation. He took one more step toward me, and everything inside me snapped. I turned and ran. I didn't even try to get back on the bike, I just ran across the empty plaza, past the shuttered annex building, down the narrow street that cut toward the main road. My lungs felt like they were ripping apart, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. At the first intersection with traffic, I finally stopped. Cars were backed up for blocks because a TSA screening area at the nearby metro had apparently closed early. Horns blared. People yelled. For once, the chaos felt comforting. Witnesses, noise, light. I kept glancing behind me, certain he'd emerge from the shadows, walking at that same slow, deliberate pace. But he never did. I reported the encounter to the police the next morning. They listened politely until I mentioned the federal buildings and the shutdown. After that, their questions turned vague. Was he homeless, drunk, mentally ill? They wrote a few notes, promised to look into it, and that was it. For weeks afterward, I avoided that trail entirely. I drove instead of biking, even though parking was a nightmare. Every dark doorway, every quiet street, every man standing too still made my stomach twist. I didn't feel safe. Not really. Not for a long time. It's been almost a year now, and the shutdown is long over, but I still think about that man more often than I want to admit. Not the words he said. Those were awful enough. But the way he moved. Calm. Certain. Like he already knew I'd be there. Last month, while organizing my cycling gear, I found something I swear hadn't been there before. A thin, deliberate scratch etched into the metal frame of my bike. The same angle, the same depth, the same mark I saw on the concrete pillar. I don't bike that trail anymore.